My name is Daniel. I'm sitting here now, in what looks like a comfortable, well-kept home, but which has slowly become the most expensive prison I have ever known. I am not seeking absolution or pity. I am seeking clarity. I need to lay out the full, unvarnished truth of the last 8 years, to perform a brutal internal audit of the decisions that brought me to this cold, final reckoning. I met Olivia at a time when I was hungry for meaning and purpose, fresh out of college, eager to start a life that mattered. She was the perfect subject for my nascent savior complex, a woman trapped in a home environment of true, soul-crushing abuse. Her parents were monsters of control, weaponizing her medical needs and financial dependence to keep her utterly broken. The trauma was real, the fear in her eyes was palpable, and the sheer desperation of her situation provided a compelling narrative, one that made me feel strong, necessary, and, crucially, in love with the idea of rescuing her. This initial, powerful emotional driver is the foundation upon which this entire toxic structure was built, and it's the reason why I ignored the subtle, corrosive warnings that began almost immediately after she moved in. I rushed to protect her, believing that once safe, she would flourish. I miscalculated the depth of the damage, and more fatally, I misjudged the strategic utility she derived from that damage. The narrative of the broken bird quickly became the narrative of the cage. My youthful optimism blinded me to the impending reality of perpetual stagnation. This is where the truth begins to hurt, not just for her, but for the man who was so easily fooled by his own ego. We moved fast, driven by external threats. Within 8 months of dating, the situation with her parents escalated dramatically. They began actively withholding vital medication, including her inhaler for asthma, using it as a deliberate form of control, a medical hostage situation. Olivia was in no shape, mentally, emotionally, or practically, to enter the workforce and secure her own health insurance. She was paralyzed by the trauma, lacking basic life skills, a consequence of her abusive upbringing. The solution seemed obvious, pragmatic, and urgently necessary. We needed to marry quickly so she could be covered under my employer's robust health plan. It was a small, quick courthouse ceremony, a rushed exchange of vows for a health card. I remembered thinking how romantic, how essential, this act of protection was. It was a move born of true concern, but it was also the moment I officially codified my role as her sole, comprehensive provider. This early commitment, born of crisis, established a dangerous precedent. I would handle all the hard parts of adult life, and she would focus on healing. We continued with intensive therapy and medication trials. Yet, despite the stable environment and the reliable medical care I provided, I noticed the first, unsettling signs of inertia. The genuine attempts at recovery began to look less like a struggle to live and more like a struggle not to change. The symptoms began to mutate from trauma responses into excuses for inaction, each new diagnosis a reinforcement of the wall around her. My commitment, once a shield, was quickly becoming a comfortable enclosure. The list of chronic conditions became her impenetrable fortress of non-compliance. The initial diagnoses were complex but understandable: CPTSD, depression, generalized anxiety. But as years passed and the security of my health plan remained, the list expanded with astonishing regularity. ADHD, PCOS, IBS, AERD, asthma, and psoriasis. It wasn't just a list of ailments. It was a comprehensive inventory of reasons why she could not be a functioning partner. Every new condition served to justify the last. I can't go to therapy because my IBS is flaring up. I can't look for work because the ADHD medication is making my anxiety worse. The goal, I realized much later, wasn't to eliminate the barriers, but to perfect the narrative of impossibility. I was the one who diligently drove her to every specialist, who managed the prescriptions, who spent hours researching treatment options. I was the dedicated support system, patiently waiting for the real Olivia to emerge from beneath the rubble of her illnesses. I was making more than enough money. We lived comfortably, even luxuriously, insulated from financial worry. This financial cushion, meant to be a tool for her recovery, instead became a soft, deep bed of enablement. We were supposed to endure this quiet life now so we could have adventures later. 8 years later, I am forced to confront the truth. For her, the quiet life is the adventure, and her illnesses are the perfect, unassailable excuse to maintain it. The waiting game has ended. I've been waiting for a person who actively chooses not to arrive. 8 years, and the routine is a suffocating masterpiece of predictability. Her life is a loop, running within the precise, safe boundaries of our home. There is no schedule, only the random dictates of her body and mood. She wakes up at whatever arbitrary hour, often well into the afternoon, spends the initial hours scrolling mindlessly on her phone in bed, then performs the monumental migration to the living room. Once there, the rotation begins. The computer for low-effort video games, the couch for watching YouTube on the TV, or the phone for endless online reading. This is her entire daily itinerary. There is no creative output, no intellectual pursuit, no skill building, no forward motion. When I'm home, we talk, we hang out, and that's the insidious part. Because we do get along well in that low-stakes domestic vacuum, the inertia is masked. We share jokes, we talk about the videos we watch. It creates the illusion of partnership. But the day ends the same way. An abrupt declaration of being tired or sick, and the retreat back to the sanctuary of the bedroom. This pattern is not just a symptom of illness. It is a carefully cultivated lifestyle. It is the absolute zero point of adult responsibility, a state of professional repose funded entirely by my labor. The consistency of this stasis is what finally broke my perspective. I wasn't married to a woman healing. I was married to a human still life, a permanent fixture in a carefully curated, stagnant landscape. The deterioration of her personal care became the most difficult, tangible evidence of her mental surrender. It was the physical reality that my rationalizations could no longer ignore. She would wear the same clothes for days, sometimes a week. Showers, once a daily routine, became a monumental, monthly event, if that. Her justification was always the same, rote defense. It takes so much energy out of me, and the slightly aggressive, defensive claim, you're not supposed to shower every day anyway. While I recognize that for some with chronic illness or depression, hygiene is a challenge, her excuses began to feel hollow. I watched her struggle after a shower, the exhaustion, the heat sensitivity, and I felt guilty, but then I'd see her spend 6 continuous hours gaming, showing no sign of energy deficit. The truth lay in the selective nature of her stamina. Low stakes, high reward activities were possible. High stakes, low reward activities, like maintaining basic hygiene for my comfort, were impossible. Consequently, the inevitable stench, a faint but pervasive smell, became a constant third party in our marriage. It was a repulsive, unaddressed problem that symbolized the deeper decay. The final, damning piece of evidence. When visitors were due, she could magically force herself into the shower or strategically deploy enough dry shampoo to mask the odor. Her incapacity was conditional upon external scrutiny. This realization was the first bullet through the heart of my devotion. The complete abdication of household responsibilities was another towering monument to her strategic apathy. I stopped asking her to do big tasks years ago. I whittled down her responsibilities to the most minuscule, simple, and low-effort chores imaginable, tasks designed to give her a fractional sense of contribution. Emptying the small garbage cans in the 2 bathrooms when they were full. Crushing the few soda cans for recycling. Tasks that took less than 5 minutes, that required minimal physical strain. And yet, she would consistently, stubbornly fail. The bathroom bins would overflow onto the floor. The cans would pile up in the corner of the kitchen. Her response was always the same, a breezy, insincere, "Oh, I forgot," or the definitive, "I'm just too tired." It wasn't forgetfulness, it was weaponized incompetence. It was a silent, daily reinforcement of the established power dynamic. Daniel works, Daniel earns, Daniel cleans, Daniel manages, and Olivia exists. She only maintained her personal desk area, and again, only if company was expected, a clean perimeter for her sanctuary. This behavior wasn't the result of her illnesses, it was the conscious exploitation of them. The moment I saw her failure to act not as paralysis but as passive-aggressive control, the shift in my perspective became irreversible. I was not her husband. I was her unpaid, live-in domestic staff. Her interpretation of risk has been warped into an ideology of absolute avoidance. If there is even the slightest theoretical chance that she won't be able to complete something, a chore, an outing, a simple task, she refuses to engage. She has become ridiculously risk-averse, not just to physical danger, but to the danger of failure itself. The fear of not finishing a task, of not performing perfectly, creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. The anxiety spirals, she genuinely feels sick, and her prediction of failure is validated, giving her the emotional license to retreat. This cycle has severely limited her already small world. We can barely manage dinner dates. It has to be cheap fast food, and her anxiety is so high that she usually wants to leave immediately. It's easier, she suggests, for me to just pick it up at the drive-thru and bring it back home. And I enable it. Why? Because the resistance is so exhausting. The emotional cost of fighting is so high that the path of least resistance always wins. Every outing feels like pulling teeth, extracting effort against her will. This pattern is the ultimate evidence that her true struggle isn't with her body, it's with her will. She has chosen the certainty of stagnation over the risk of growth. This choice, consistently made over years, is the heart of the betrayal. Preparing her for even the simplest external event requires a strategic deployment of effort that would rival a military operation. I have to start days in advance. Constant, gentle reminders. I attempt, futilely, to realign her completely deregulated sleep schedule, often having to wake her up myself, as she refuses to use an alarm clock, claiming she sleeps through them. This means my own morning routine is dictated by her needs, adding an unnecessary layer of stress to my workday. Then there is the forced compliance with basic hygiene, the negotiation over a shower. It's an exhausting cycle of management. Even simple, beneficial activities like taking a walk are met with an endless, inventive list of counter-arguments. Too hot, too cold, too much sun, too many bugs, too humid, too dry. The environmental conditions must be perfect, which is to say, they are never right. I have to be her executive function, her personal assistant, her alarm clock, and her guilt-ridden warden. This is the definition of a parent-child dynamic, not a marriage. I am not married to a partner. I am married to a human infrastructure project that constantly rejects its own maintenance. The energy I spend managing her avoidance is energy I could be spending on my own growth, my own life, and my own joy. This uneven distribution of labor and emotional energy is the true injustice of our arrangement. The greatest emotional disappointment is the stark contrast between our early vision and our current reality. I asked her once, what happened to our grand plans? The talk of seeing museums, visiting silly tourist traps, exploring natural wonders, taking small weekend trips just for us. She responded with a hollow indifference, stating she isn't really all that interested in those things anymore. The passion for life, the curiosity that I found so attractive, had completely vanished, replaced by a comfortable, numb acceptance of domestic mediocrity. Neither of us are social butterflies, but I always wanted to share significant, special moments. Instead, my life is beginning to tragically mirror hers. I am home constantly, wasting time on the computer, because what is the point of doing anything alone? I have a few local friends, having moved here for my career, but as we all entered our 30s, their focus shifted to their own partners and young children. I understand that, but the sharing of the experience was always paramount to my enjoyment. Her profound disinterest has effectively marooned me in my own home, forcing me into an isolation that is not natural to me. I feel the years slipping away, the decade of my 20s reduced to work and caretaking, with little to show for it. I am losing the chance to build a life rich in memories, all because she has unilaterally decided that her comfort zone is non-negotiable. The insidious brilliance of this arrangement lies in its ability to mask the true issues. As long as we are confined to the house, hanging out, talking, and having fun in that superficial, low-effort way, everything is great. We get along spectacularly on a social level. We have a deep comfort with each other. We can be ourselves, warts and all. We rarely argue, she is never mean, and she is always quick to express gratitude for what I do. She appears well-intentioned, genuine, and loving. This easy companionship is the toxic sugar coating on the poison pill of our relationship. It provides just enough emotional fulfillment to prevent me from fully pulling the plug. But the reality is stark. I can no longer envision a future that involves anything more than this stagnation. No shared accomplishments, no growth, no exploration. Not even the simple act of cooking dinner together, which often falls to me because she is too tired. The romance is dead, asphyxiated by the sheer weight of her dependence. The question is no longer if she will get better, but whether she is fundamentally unwilling to grow. And my hope is so low that it is essentially non-existent. The affection I feel is now akin to the love for a fragile family member, a love rooted in obligation and pity, not passion or equality. I must accept the brutal truth that I am her primary enabler. It has been the path of least resistance for years. Life is hard, my career is demanding, and fighting her paralyzing anxiety and self-pity was always more exhausting than simply doing the task myself. Every time I've tried to assert myself, to set boundaries, I have capitulated. Why? Because the discussions always follow the same, devastating script. The moment I raise a concern, the moment I suggest she needs to push herself, the sobbing starts. She collapses into tears, cries out that she is trying her best, a phrase that has become a weapon, and then retreats, going emotionally mute for days. The resulting silence and palpable guilt are so overwhelming that I immediately back down, apologizing for my insensitivity. I stop fighting because I know the predictable, painful end of the confrontation. This cycle has effectively conditioned me to avoid conflict, to accept the status quo, and to subordinate my needs to her carefully managed fragility. I haven't been able to decisively put my foot down because every attempt results in an emotional punishment that she expertly administers. I am trapped in a feedback loop of avoidance and capitulation, and she holds the emotional kill switch. The sheer, overwhelming mental health component of her situation is the ultimate complication. I know that her trauma likely did break something fundamental inside her. However, she is showing a frightening level of resistance to actual, meaningful treatment. It's not that she refuses to see doctors. It's that none of the treatments seem to penetrate the wall she has erected. Medications for years, with the only notable success being the elimination of her most terrifying trauma nightmares, a genuine positive. But beyond that, nothing moves the needle. She attends therapy, but the lack of progress is staggering. Honesty of her previous therapist, who stated that she couldn't continue because Olivia wasn't taking any action outside of their sessions. This revelation, that the therapeutic failure was due to her will and not the science, was a critical turning point for me. I wanted her to try EMDR therapy for her CPTSD, a method with significant, proven success for trauma. Tried as pseudoscience, despite my showing her extensive research. I can't force her. She's an adult. But her refusal to engage with effective, challenging treatments suggests a fundamental, strategic preference for the illness over the effort of healing. The weight of carrying both our lives finally caused my own system to fail. My executive function declined dramatically, forcing me to seek help. This journey of self-reflection led to a brutal, unflinching realization of how deeply messed up our entire dynamic had become. The light bulb finally clicked. This wasn't just a tough marriage, it was a system of exploitation. My long-term doubts, the fear that I couldn't continue unless we saw a complete turnaround. The result was the predictable spiral of tears and withdrawal. This time, however, I held my ground just enough to suggest couples therapy. It introduced valuable ideas, compromise, shared vision, and accountability. My long-term doubts, the fear that I couldn't continue unless we saw a complete turnaround. The result was the predictable spiral of tears and withdrawal. This time, however, I held my ground just enough to suggest couples therapy. It introduced valuable ideas: compromise, shared vision, and accountability. This draft clear, measurable goals. A better division of chores. A commitment to doing things outside the house more often, and critically, a non-negotiable commitment to showering at least once a week. These were the smallest possible steps toward function. Therapy was tragically predictable, yet still managed to devastate me. She reneged on every single commitment. The moment the neutral third party was removed from the equation, she defaulted back to her original, inert state. The chores went undone. The shower commitments were broken within 2 weeks. Were met with the immediate onset of debilitating anxiety and physical complaints. I watched her deliberately sabotage the very structure we had painstakingly built to save our marriage. It stripped away the last veneer of plausible deniability. It was no longer about being too sick. It was about choosing to fail because failure returned her to the comfort of my care. Completely evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard sense of certainty. The dwelling thoughts became facts. This situation is wrong. This is not what I signed up for. And unless I act decisively, my entire future will be consumed by her inertia. These disappear, and my 30s are starting the same way. If this continues, I will become an aged, resentful caretaker with nothing to show for his life but the maintenance of her self-imposed quarantine. That tears me apart is the issue of intent. Is she doing this maliciously? Is she deliberately taking advantage of my income, my empathy, and my hospitality? Or is her mental health truly so catastrophic that she is incapable of choice? For being a meal ticket, she performs the role of the devoted, if fragile, wife with unsettling proficiency. The words she speaks are loving, kind, and grateful. But her actions are in complete, violent opposition to her words. Not knowingly sacrifice her husband's future for her own comfort. A caring partner would fight tooth and nail for their recovery, even if it was difficult. Her lack of fight, her strategic complacency, points strongly toward the former conclusion. I feel backed into a dark, unforgiving corner with only 2 viable options remaining, neither of which offers an easy path to peace. My self-preservation and the devastating risk of her self-destruction. This choice defines the entire moral landscape of my escape. Maintain the status quo. Continue the slow, agonizing process of enablement and hope, knowing with absolute certainty that she will never change. I keep sacrificing years of my life, postponing my dreams, and allowing my identity to be reduced to that of the provider. This is the path of cowardice and moral safety, protecting me from the guilt of her potential demise. Divorce her. Free myself from the burden, reclaim my future, and start over. This sounds simple, but it carries a crippling, immediate liability: her life. She has repeatedly stated that if this marriage ends, if I leave, or God forbid, die in an accident, she will kill herself. Drama, without tears, just as a cold, undeniable fact. I know this is a classic sign of an abusive partner, using the ultimate threat to ensure control. But I also know, given her history of attempts before I met her, that she is likely not bluffing. The relation is working perfectly because it is built upon a foundation of genuine risk. The relation is working perfectly because it is built upon a foundation of genuine risk. Can I risk the possibility of finding her dead, knowing that my desire for freedom was the direct cause? The consequence of my choice would be the crushing weight of guilt, a lifetime sentence of asking, was my life worth more than hers? This is the core of the moral trap. Furthermore, she is technically right that she has nowhere else to go. She possesses 0 tools for independent adult life. No college education, no meaningful work history, no driver's license, no credit score, no local support network, and no interaction with her own distant family. The safety net I provide is the only thing keeping her afloat, perhaps the only thing keeping her alive. If I leave, and she does survive, she has minimal options. She cannot go back to her parents. Not only are we estranged, but they are both currently hospitalized, nearing the end of life due to their own self-destructive lifestyle choices. Her isolation is total, and it is a masterpiece of intentional codependence. I have repeatedly tried to build an alternative safety net for her, just in case. Driving lessons? I don't have anywhere to go, or the paralyzing, I think I'll get distracted and crash, it's too dangerous. School or vocational training? She refuses, saying she can't bear to do it again. Every proposed solution, every path to independence, is met with an impenetrable wall of excuses and fear. She does not want to learn to drive because driving means she might have to leave the house. She does not want to go to school because schooling means she might have to get a job. The refusal is consistent, and it is a clear choice. I came into this relationship leveraging my stability to help someone I loved who was in desperate need, but at this point, the feeling is not one of sacrifice, but of my gifts having been maliciously or carelessly squandered. I have been setting myself on fire to keep her warm for nearly a decade, and I am reduced to ash. A friend, after listening to my sanitized version of events, offered the cruelest, yet most accurate, diagnosis. It's like you are taking care of a child, Daniel. Not a wife. That observation struck me with the force of a physical blow. The romance is gone, replaced by a hollow sense of familial obligation. I still love her, but it is the distant, pitying affection you feel for an incapable relative, not the passionate, equal love for a spouse. I cannot see her as my equal when she refuses to perform even the most basic functions of an autonomous adult. If, by some miracle, she suddenly got better, found the will to grow, to be a true partner, would the feelings return? Perhaps, but my hopes have been systematically eroded to the point where they are functionally non-existent. I have to proceed on the assumption that she will remain exactly as she is, a permanent drain on my resources and my emotional landscape. The time for waiting and hoping is over. The time for action based on cold, hard reality has arrived, regardless of the consequences she threatens. The turning point, the moment of absolute, irrefutable clarity, occurred just 2 weeks ago. After yet another failed argument about the overflow of garbage in the bathroom bins, a situation I am almost ashamed to admit I let happen, I went to clear the mess myself. I noticed her personal journal, an old, spiral-bound notebook she used to take notes for therapy, on her nightstand. I fought the urge to look, but the festering suspicion, the nagging doubt about her sincerity, was too strong. I opened it. What I found was not a diary of heartbreak, or a collection of suicidal ideations, or a plan for recovery. It was a ledger, a meticulous, handwritten financial document. The pages were filled with neat, terrifying columns of numbers. Not about her feelings, but about my finances. She had itemized her chronic conditions, cross-referenced them with the cost of her specialist visits and medication, all covered by my insurance. Next to these costs, she had columns detailing my net income and the cost of maintaining the house. But the most horrifying section was a series of complex equations. She was calculating the opportunity cost of her illness. She had estimates for how much she would have to earn if she worked a minimum wage job, and subtracted that from the amount of disposable income she now enjoyed. There were further calculations comparing the hours she spent resting or playing games to the hours she would have to spend functional in a legitimate job. The calculation was not an abstract exercise. It was a cold, strategic analysis of dependency. The final figure, circled and underlined with a chilling finality, was the bottom line: her continued total incapacitation and the maintenance of her sick status was the most financially and emotionally rewarding option available to her. It resulted in a tax-free, fully supported existence that cost me, her husband, $X thousands annually, demanding nothing in return but my enduring presence. This ledger was the smoking gun of her calculated betrayal. It proved that her illness was not just a tragic consequence of trauma, but a carefully monetized lifestyle choice. The trauma may have created the initial conditions, but the inertia, the refusal to grow, the weaponized incompetence, all of it was being maintained by a rational, strategic mind focused on maximum comfort and minimal effort. The image of the pathetic, Broken bird shattered, replaced by the terrifying image of a cold-blooded parasite who had engineered a perfect life of luxury and leisure at my expense. The love and gratitude she expressed were not genuine expressions of her heart. They were payments, transactional assurances designed to keep the cash flow open and the caregiving operational. The realization instantly transformed my moral quandary. I am no longer deciding whether to abandon a sick woman. I am deciding whether to tolerate my own financial and emotional exploitation. I am no longer responsible for her trauma. I am responsible for stopping her calculated abuse of my empathy. The suicide threat remains the only variable, but now it is viewed through a different lens. It is not the plea of a desperate victim. It is the ultimate weapon of a calculating abuser who knows I have nothing left to lose but my moral conscience. I cannot allow her to hold my life hostage indefinitely with this threat. To do so is to accept a lifetime of servitude. I am now proceeding with the final steps, not with anger, but with a cold, surgical resolve. I have consulted with a lawyer and a therapist simultaneously. The plan is structured to minimize risk while ensuring my absolute freedom. I will not engage in a messy, emotional confrontation. Instead, I will execute a clean break, one that is preemptive and non-negotiable. I will establish a financial buffer designed solely for her, fully documented and legally binding. This safety net will consist of 6 months of fully paid rent in a small, safe apartment near reliable public transport, and a lump sum of money specifically earmarked for basic living expenses during that time. This is not out of love. It is a transactional investment in her continued existence, a severance payment designed to negate my guilt. I will also compile a comprehensive list of resources, contacts for local crisis centers, low-cost mental health services, shelters, and job training programs. I am placing all the tools for survival and growth directly into her lap, making it clear that I have provided her with a viable, 6-month pathway to independence. The moment I deliver the final documents, my role as her provider ends. This is the only way to counteract her claim that she has nowhere to go and no options. I am creating options, but I am refusing to be one of them. The choice to engage with these resources will be her free will, and her survival will depend on her own willingness to step out of the inertia she so meticulously engineered. The final confrontation will be brief, clinical, and devoid of the emotional chaos she relies on. I will not allow her to trigger the tears and the subsequent mute withdrawal. I will simply present the notarized documents, the divorce papers, the lease agreement, the financial accounts, and the resource list. My words will be measured and final. The marriage is over. I have provided you with a safety net and the resources to begin your life. I wish you well, but my decision is final. I will be out of the house by the end of the day. Her response, whether it is hysterical rage, tears, or the ultimate threat of self-harm, will be her responsibility alone. I will have done everything morally possible to ensure her survival without sacrificing my own. I have already rented a small studio near my office. My clothes, my personal effects, and all my important documents are packed and waiting in my car. My entire exit strategy is designed to prevent capitulation. I cannot afford to be alone with her in the aftermath. The car will be packed, the engine running. I have to leave before her manipulation can take hold, before the sight of her tears can resurrect the guilt that paralyzed me for so long. This is the final, terrifying price of freedom. I will have traded 8 years of my life for the possibility of a future, and the risk that she might make good on her threat is the collateral I must accept. But I know that if I stay, I will die a slow, emotional death, becoming a hollow shell of resentment. My life is worth more than her strategy. The confession is complete. The truth has been laid bare, stripped of all romantic justification. I was not a savior. I was a mark. The broken bird was a cuckoo in the nest, strategically displacing me to ensure its own survival. I am walking away from the comfortable prison, but I am not walking away entirely clean. I carry the weight of her potential choice, but I also carry the certainty of my own survival. My name is Daniel, and I am choosing to live. The financial ledger she kept to track her spoils now serves as the cold, hard evidence that justifies my escape. The moment I shut the door on this house for the last time, I am closing the chapter on a life defined by another's inertia. The reckoning is not just for her, it is for me, a final act of cold, self-reclamation. My future begins now, clean of her dependence, and finally, unequivocally, mine.